My name is Dustin Kelly, but everybody calls me DJ. I'm prior Army, serving as both a Ford observer and a military police officer. I've spent the last 14 and a half years as a police officer and detective in a large metropolitan police department. Two things that I've learned throughout my career. One, everybody has a story to tell. And two, the best stories are true. This is the DTD Podcast. Welcome back to the DTD Podcast. Tonight, I'm so excited. This has been in the works for about 2 months, and we finally got him here. Bill Rapier. Tonight, we're going to talk about a lot of different things that we normally don't talk about on this show. And a big focus of it is going to be religion and how it has affected Bill's life and how he has kind of moved through everything that he's done. He has an interesting story, and I can't wait to get into it. So, Bill, welcome into the studio.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, so here's the deal. I want to start with this quote, and this comes directly from your website. It says, "Before I dive into any of the finer points of training to survive a violent confrontation, I should be clear on the most important thing, being right with God." Now, that's an interesting thing to see on someone who is teaching how to be a pretty dangerous person. And the things that you've done in life have been dangerous. And I was told by another guest that I've interviewed, and they'll remain nameless because we did it off air. They told me that you're one of the most dangerous men on the planet, that it is scary how dangerous you are. So I want to start out with just asking you, how do those two things mesh in your life, and how do they come together to form you?
So first off, it's one of the things that people think is a contradiction. And it's really just this, I'd say a misunderstanding or kind of where the state of modern evangelicalism is right now is where guys think, or overall, I would say that people think that if you're a Christian, you're and specifically a Christian man, you're some sort of milquetoast, go along to get along, don't ever seek conflict. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's not biblical. If we look at, they wrote songs about David, right? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. So they literally wrote songs and sang them about him, about his warrior prowess. And yet he was a man after God's own heart. Not that he didn't have faults. He had many, many faults, serious faults, but was very, the two are not mutually exclusive.
And I understand that because I watched an interview with you, and I want to go back to your childhood, but I want to point this out. I watched an interview with you where you were talking about when you were with the SEALs and when you were going through kind of selection and stuff. And one of the questions that the psychologist asked you was, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, but religion is super important to you. So how can this be a job where you're going to take a life? How can those two things match? And I'm guessing the question was posed to you because they were trying to knock you off kilter a little bit to see what you would say. And you mentioned the same things that you did just now. How did that go over with that psychologist of you saying something like that?
For the psychologist, it was kind of a gotcha question. He thought that he could quote the Ten Commandments and specifically the King James version of the Ten Commandments, which says, "Thou shalt not kill," which if you look at the ancient Hebrew text, they use a word that is much more commonly used for murder than it is for just killing. I mean, just like we have words for killing and then murder and manslaughter, the ancient Hebrews had the same thing. And so if you look at any of the modern translations, they all translate it as "thou shalt not murder," because they're two separate things. So while the King James version isn't technically wrong, because if you're murdering someone, you are killing them. But if you're killing someone, you're not necessarily murdering them. And so I explained that, and then, told the story about, King David and them writing songs about him. And I said that if David could do that and be a man after God's own heart, I don't see why I couldn't do the same thing. And the psychologist didn't like the question. All the team guys in the room were like nodding their heads like, yes.
And I think you're right. It seems funny. In the job that I do right now, we have to take a psychological evaluation like once a year, once every 2 years. And I've never seen them really throw a question like that. Now they will say things like you'll take a test and it'll say what your strong traits are, what your weak traits are. But what I feel like he was trying to do there was see if he could separate kind of the man from the soldier. Would that be a correct analysis of it?
That either that or just looking for inconsistencies. I mean, I think it is a very valid thing. I mean, every time we do a mindset talk in training, it's that I bring up that example during the willingness talk, because it's such a, if you think deep down inside that all killing is wrong, then that could lead to hesitation, and that hesitation can lead to regret, either regret due to inaction or regret due to overaction. And so, and really that gets to the heart of the whole willingness question. If you don't think through your willingness ahead of time, you end up with regret. And so it's a valid thing for him to bring up. It is something, it goes back to like, is your belief system congruent? Because if you're on one day you're spouting, yeah, I'm a warrior, soldier, operator, however you want to put it, and then on Sundays you're saying, well, all that stuff is wrong, then that's going to create some pretty serious inconsistencies in your life. So I think he was absolutely within his right to go after that. If he, I just think he had a lack of understanding in that area.
And I want to point out to people that may not know you, I don't know how they couldn't have heard of you, but you spent 20 years in the Navy. You spent a majority of that time in the SEALs, and then 14 of those years with Development Group, which is, we can say it, the elite of the elite. But your childhood is what really was, it was really interesting to me when I looked into your childhood. Now, you were born in Portland. You don't talk about that a lot now because of everything that's going on.
We don't
there.
like to mention that.
So you moved around a lot. You moved to Southern California, Germany, San Jose, Swaziland, Colorado Springs. You were all over the place. Now, the reason that you moved around was because your parents were missionaries. And so you grew up in a house that was, I would guess, very religious, and very faith-based. But I want to know how that kind of set you on your path, because as when we talked before we started recording, if you look at it just from the outside, it does seem like you would maybe follow in your father's footsteps or your mother's footsteps and be a missionary and spread the word. But you decided to spread the word in a different way, because well, and we'll get to that later on. But what I mean is, even with SEALs that have been stationed with you, that worked with you, said that you were very steadfast in your faith, that you talked to them about it if they wanted to talk about it. You were never afraid to approach a subject that a lot of people wouldn't approach. So I want to talk about your childhood and how that kind of formed this resiliency in you to never be afraid of your faith and to always be in a kind of a different atmosphere, because that's what you were in the SEALs, in different atmospheres, different countries, different cultures, all the time. How it made you a better SEAL soldier and kind of a man.
Wow, that's loaded right there. I guess for one, my parents were always very supportive. They've said with myself and with my siblings that they wanted to encourage our bent in life. Kind of, we all have a natural direction kind of that we're going. And I really believe that that's, God lays that on your heart. I would say that for me, being a frogman, that was something that I was designed to do. I've got pictures of me being 5 or 6 years old with, an old Army jacket from my dad on, and, an old single barrel shotgun, and a beret and a painted on beard. And, so it's one of those things that, from as long as I can remember, I wanted to do some sort of soldiering job. Now, the question was always what, in what capacity would that look like? Would it be, for a long time, I wanted to go to a service academy, specifically to West Point. And then kind of towards the end of high school, I no longer wanted to go to school and kind of fell off of that path. And then when I decided I was going to enlist, the question really just turned into what service am I going to join? And really, I read up on it a lot, and I was looking for the hardest organization to get into with the highest likelihood of seeing action. And I think, I didn't always think this at the time, but I think in retrospect now, I think I chose the right, made the right decision. So yeah, my parents were always very, very encouraging with, with the direction that I was going. And again, it was really interesting. I actually had never even met any, kind of quote unquote Bible believing Christians that thought that all killing was wrong, until much, much later on in my career. I just didn't, I was always brought up with the concept that murder is wrong, but killing to protect your family or killing in battle that's not a sin.
When you say that, though, we go back to that same thing again, where we talk about this family that was brought up. Your parents were never against you joining the military at all. And you said that you wanted to go to a service academy. Now, was it just because you got to the end of school and, like a lot of people, you're just like, yeah, 4 more years of school's not for me? Because when you actually did choose where you were going to go in the military, you chose a very rough path to get to where you finally got to. It took you about 2 years longer to get there than the average person. And so I can see where you chose the medical, that fits into kind of that missionary lifestyle, the saving, it
actually has nothing to do with
nothing to do with
it. Here's my the reason why I chose corpsman. So
okay.
for the non-Navy or Marine Corps folks listening, corpsman is what the Navy calls a medic. So at the time when I joined, in order to go into the SEAL teams, or in order to even go to BUDS, you had to have what they called a SEAL source rating, or in the Army it would be an MOS, military occupational specialty. And the idea was they wanted jobs that were somewhat applicable. So welders, electricians, like intel guys, radio guys, medics. So there's a list of like 20 or 30 different source ratings that they had at the time. So honestly, the only reason I picked corpsman, it was not because I liked doing medicine or had great empathy for people, because I really, the more I did the medicine stuff, the less I actually enjoyed the trauma side of it. I did not like the bedside manner side of, oh, my knee, doc, my knee hurts again. Like, take some Motrin, man. Like, ice it and take some,
So really, you were lacking in empathy is what I'm taking from this.
So the whole reason I did it was, just looking at it objectively, most guys don't make it through BUDS.
Okay.
If I didn't make it through BUDS as a corpsman, I could try and go with the Marine recon units. And if I couldn't do that, at least I could still be with the Marine Corps infantry unit, as a ground pounder, because they take Navy corpsmen assigned to them. So that was really my backup plan, really.
That's actually what my nephew does for the Navy. And he went to both Navy corpsman school and then went to Marine Corps so that he could be utilized in both worlds. You also did the Special Forces Medical School, though, right?
I did the SOMED, Special Operations Medical Course, also called the short course.
And then I thought was funny when you were talking about it. You said that they told you, "Hey, this is what doctors learn. You're going to learn what doctors learn." And then you actually went into the trauma section and you heard a doctor kind of spitting out everything going on, and you said, "I understood every single thing. I might not have keyed on to it, but I understood every single thing he was saying." So it seemed to work out well for you, though. How did it transfer over as an actual SEAL? Did you never really utilize that skill, correct?
No, so the Navy, or the SEAL teams in particular, were lacking in corpsmen. So when I went in, I think we had maybe 20% or 30% of our BUDS class was corpsmen. I mean, there was a phase where like 50% of all BUDS classes were corpsmen. It's just because they were trying to get corpsmen through. And so by the time I went through, like when I went through SEAL tactical training, I wasn't even the corpsman for our unit. I was a machine gunner. And then I got into my first platoon, And I told them I'm a machine gunner. I'm not really a corpsman. And they laughed at me and they said, you have to be a corpsman. And then my second platoon, there was enough corpsmen that were into being corpsmen that when I told them I'm really a machine gunner, just pretending to be a corpsman, they let me carry a machine gun. So that was much more my mentality. I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, you're more of a, and everything I've heard from you, you are very much more of a hands-on kind of guy, and directly interacting. Now, interesting to me about it was you spent the majority of your time with development group,
Yeah.
and that I've interviewed SEALs before and stuff like that, but you seem to have gone to them pretty quickly in your career. Especially being all the schools that you had to go to get just in the pipeline and stuff like that. It seems like you went over there very quickly.
So I had a couple things going for me. First off, when I left or when I graduated from 18 Delta, uh, we'd heard through the rumor mill that an STT class had just started at SEAL Team 3. So a lot of the guys were like, well, I'm just going to go on leave then because I'm just going to be sitting around there. I didn't have a life. So I just drove, I graduated and just drove out there. I'm like, well, what else am I going to do? I check in, I talk to the training senior chief, and he goes, well, shoot, we're only 2 weeks into this and all we've covered is medical stuff. So you haven't missed anything. So I got to jump right in with an STT class. And it ended up putting me like 6 to 9 months ahead of my peer group that I had graduated 18 Delta from, which was, nice because I wanted to, get after it and deploy. And, the whole reason why most team guys join the teams, you want to go to war. Well, we didn't have a war going on at the time. So it was, well, let's, do an ARG deployment and at least maybe you can do something cool. So I got right into a platoon after STT, did that first platoon, came back from that platoon, and they told me they needed a guy to go deploy again right away. And I'm like, yep, that's me. And they actually were misinformed. It was actually they need a guy to leave for the desert to begin a workup immediately. So I think I had like 1 or 2 days home, and then I was back out at an island in the desert for like another month doing another land warfare workup. But that again, that really bumped me ahead because most of the time guys get back from a deployment and they've got a month or so worth of leave, and then kind of 6 months of individual level training, and then they jump back into unit level training. So that was helpful for me. And then I had heard early on, I had no clue what Dev Group was when I joined the Navy. And then as soon as I got to SEAL Team 3, I started hearing little whispers, and I couldn't say it as a brand new guy because they tell you, focus on being a good new guy first. But I knew right away. I'm like, that's where I want to go. So I just lined everything up. I screened to go to Dev Group after my first deployment, and then screened positive. They actually asked me to change rates, which I was very happy to do. I signed a blank piece of paper, and a couple months later, our officer in charge says, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're a radioman now." And then a couple months after that, he found me again. Was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're an IT now. There's no more radiomen." They merged all these rates, so yeah, it ended up it was helpful.
So the blank piece of paper. Did you ever see it again? Did it ever appear in your file? Did it ever have actual words on it?
It was a blank form for changing rates, basically. And it was there was a the career counselor, I believe he was.
Yeah, he sounds like he was great at his job.
Yeah, he was another team guy. It was a collateral duty for another team guy. And so he's just like, here, man, sign this piece of paper. We'll find something else for you. And I really didn't care. I was just like, hey, put me in a rate that's open, that I can advance in, that I can make rank in. And so made me a radioman.
Now, all the different positions that you held, you did 10 plus combat tours. You were assaulter, breacher, sniper team leader, troop chief, military working dog, department senior enlisted advisor. So many different things. Did you just, I know you said that you didn't have a life, but did you just jump at every single thing they said, hey, this is open?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean,
okay.
There was you're expected as a new guy, especially at the command, you're expected as a new guy to jump on every trip. and I didn't have a wife or girlfriend or anything when I first got there. I mean, I literally, I shot every single day for the first 4 months I was at the command, like Saturdays and Sundays included, because when I checked, or, when I actually, checked into where I was going after selection, they said, oh yeah, here's, this, here's your range that you can use 365, 24/7. Here's where you get your bullets from. And I
Wow.
was just like, oh, cool. So I would show up every morning, hour and a half before work started and burn through about 500 rounds. And then, Saturdays I'd normally go in after jujitsu, because I do jujitsu at like 10 or so in the morning on Saturdays. And then Sundays, go to church, have a nice breakfast after church, and then drive back to the command and train more. So it was just kind of I didn't have a whole lot going on back then. So I wanted to jump on every trip out there.
So were you training by yourself? Were there other guys out there with you? Was it a lot of alone time out there? What was it? Because the way I picture you is kind of the kung fu guy, just on your own, concentrating on what you're doing, not in meditation, but just kind of taking in each moment. Is that how it was, or were you training with other people? What was it?
I mean, it really depended. Like, I mean, if you're doing anything, unit or team level training, your
Right.
guys are with you. If you're doing, but it's like anything else. If you want to actually get good at something, you have to put in the hours on your own as well. And so sometimes there would be guys with me that, like kind of my peers that, hey man, let's hit the range again tomorrow morning. We'll meet at this time. I mean, I was, that's iron sharpens iron. It's a good, if you can get your buddies to do that stuff with you, that's great, but you can't always do that. So you have to be willing to do it by yourself if they won't show.
Now, when you go there, you said they show you this is where the ammo's at, this is where your range is at. Is it pretty much whatever you want? Any kind of ammo, any kind of weapon system, or
Well, I mean, like you have your normal stuff that you're running with. So at the time it was 226s and shorty M4s was the primary that we were using. So um, then I started breaching maybe 2 years into it.
Mhm.
So started carrying a little shorty 870 as well. And but then so that was the stuff. Like if you're going day in and day out to shoot, it's pistol and M4s. Um, yeah, I mean, I had various different machine guns throughout the years, but you're not going to the 7 meter range to blast, blast the saw. Like, that doesn't help a whole lot.
Right. Yeah. So when in your career did you start kind of, as you say, getting a life? Because I want to see how they kind of blended together.
So I'd say probably about the time that I met my wife, wife to be. Um, I started not doing jujitsu every single night and hanging out with her. So, and then that kind of just transitioned from. I mean, I went through a phase where if I was in town, I was rolling every single night, and then as I started being serious about dating my wife, and then we had a pretty short engagement because we were on a pretty hectic deployment cycle at the time. Yeah, that's so I got married in 07, and then things drastically changed at that point, because now it's no longer it's no longer the unit first. It's God, and then the wife, and then the unit.
You run into trouble with that?
To some extent. Well, so again, like, one of the things that was helpful for me was uh, the fact that I was able to put in a lot of time. So even as the guy that, like, I didn't go out drinking with the guys, but I still, like, the first couple of years, especially, like, I put in the time with the guys that did go out. I mean, it's a big cultural thing. Like, guys don't trust you if you're not hanging out with them,
Yep.
during work and after work. So, uh, just the fact that I would, go hang out with the dudes and designate drive if we're on trips. That was, I kind of had some street cred, so to speak, with the guys. So then when it was, hey, I'm married now, like, it was kind of well, of course I don't want to hang out with you guys, down at the bar. Like, I'm married now. Like,
So, when I say trouble, do you ever find that that it becomes a big conflict. And the reason I say that is because whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're in the military, there are times where you're away a lot. And it's unavoidable to be away. So one, you have to have a very strong foundation. And what I see, whether it be in law enforcement or when I was in the military, there's not that strong foundation there. And you see a lot of things fall apart when these guys are gone. We used to make the joke over in the 25th that you could always tell when a unit was deploying to go to the field or whatever, because the bar on post would be completely full, the parking lot would be completely full. So you knew at least one unit was going to the field or whatever. How did you work through that? And did you help other people kind of see like, hey man, this is the way you want to do it without being, without being teacherish to them?
Yeah, I do think it's something that it's easy for guys to get sucked into the life. Because I mean, ultimately it's pretty cool. Like, there's times where you're going to, major cities and you're flying around in helicopters, and I mean, there's some rock star treatment that goes with that. I mean,
especially SEALs.
It's cool for sure. I mean, you're doing stuff, till 10, 11 at nighttime. And then guys will hit the bar and they'll see like footage on the news of them like fast roping on top of buildings, like, at the bar. And so there's some, there's definitely some cool factor there. And I think very easy for guys to get seduced into like, this is the life. And I would try and remind guys that, hey man, like your family, you think you're indispensable right now. And when you leave a few months later, they'll be like, who is that guy? Right. 2 years later, you walk into your team room and like a bunch of new guys will be eyeballing you. Like, who's this dude that's walking into my team room? And it's just the train keeps going. And it's, no one's indispensable like you think you are at the time. But your families should always be there for you. And if you treat them properly, then usually they will be there for you. But if you get too seduced by the life, that you start thinking, well, this is more important, it can cause big problems. I mean, once I got married, I told my wife, hey, if this is too much, like, I'll leave. This is not, the kind of the opposite of the mindset, which I heard a lot, is she knew what she was getting into when she married me. This is me.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, Bill, because that's not a normal approach to it. Because you're right, a lot of people will say that, like, "Hey, you knew what you were getting into. I told you who I was," and I think a lot of people feel that if they change for that, like step away from that life, that they're not being who they are, and that leads to trouble in another sense, where maybe there's some resentment later on or whatever. And so it's crazy to hear that was your approach right off the bat. Like, hey, if you're ready for me to leave, like, did you have a plan? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do? Or were you just like, hey?
No, I mean, we got married was right after my team leader. Oh, actually, I was still a team leader. So I still did one more pump as a team leader, right after we got married. And I mean, I was really liking the job, wanted to keep doing the job. But I mean, it's just in life, you have to order what are the priorities for you, and when I say it's God, family, country, that's, I'm serious about that. Like, God is more important than my wife. My wife is more important than my kids are. And my family is more important than the country is, or my unit, or anything else. And if, when you deviate from that, your world falls apart, right? If you start placing, now as a civilian, if you start placing making dollars over time with family, or over your faith, like your whole life falls apart. So it has to go. Yeah, I think it's just, it's comforting, and it's very, honestly, I think it's a very simple approach, just to go, well, this is the most important thing in my life. This is the next most important thing. This is the next most important thing. And I'm just going to order everything around that. And, if you do that, it's much easier to stay, what we call stay on mission. What is the mission?
Absolutely. But why do you think it is so hard for, I would say, I don't know if I want to say the majority, but for a vast number, why is it so hard to take that approach?
I think most guys, because they haven't thought it through, which is again why mindset is so important. If you sit a guy down and you say, "Hey, man, what is more important to you?" Right on the guy, the guy's getting ready to get married. You say, "Hey, man, is you getting married? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to have kids? Is that more important to you, or is your job more important to you?" I think most guys at that point will say, "No, my wife is going to be more important to me. My kids are going to be more important to me." So it's normally I think easy to say right there, but then it's the actions at the time, and that really is the harder part is because it's never really, they never ask you to come out and say work is more important than family, but they ask every day by saying, "Hey, come on this extra trip. Like, we need a volunteer, and you want to be a good dude and volunteer to go do stuff. You want to fill that extra shift, whatever it is. You want to be that guy and step up." And if you think about it, like if you value what they think of you more than you do your relationship with your family, it ends up causing problems for you. And so, but if you think about it ahead of time, then you can go, "Man, I'd like to go on this trip." And maybe even I understand that, like, I'm going to lose some face with this, or like maybe a little bit of credibility if I don't do this. But my wife really needs me to be home right now, or my kids need me to be home right now. Um, and that's more important to me. So, okay, that's where we're at. And really, I think if more guys did that, you'd end up with a healthier force long term, because you wouldn't have guys that are on their second and third, sometimes fourth marriages. Uh, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the health of the force, and trying to keep families together, but then it's, hey, run at this crazy pace, and and keep the wives shut out of everything, and instead of going, well, no, if we're truly a family centric, if we want to keep the guy healthy, we need to keep the family healthy.
So my next set of questions would be, and these are going to be kind of loaded, so just be ready because of how you were saying. I want you to be ready for that. I think the military, and in that sense, first responders, I think that those things do a horrible job of doing exactly what you said. Because there's that mentality that if you're not up for this and you're not up for this, or you want to take a step back for a while and breathe, and just experience some stuff around you, maybe slow it down a little bit, that there's that mentality that you're not doing your part, you're not doing your job. Would you agree that the military does a horrible job of that?
For the most part. Well, I mean, I can't speak for the whole military. I can speak
Of course.
for our organization, and say absolutely yes. Um, yeah, in fact, it's funny. I was training with a different military organization earlier this year, and some of the cultural things that they had going on, I was absolutely blown away by. In a good sense, just where they were, allowed to bring wives on trips, and uh, I just I was shocked, because culturally that was not something that we were ever permitted, or let alone encouraged to do. So I thought that was a great a great step in the right direction, that here they're taking care of these guys by trying to support family units.
And so, what do you think with the next part? What do you think that the military could do better? Now, the reason I ask you law enforcement, first responder, military, because you train a lot of law enforcement, so I know you're talking to them on the side. You're talking to them after training's done. I'm positive that you hear the same things that you heard in the military. What can be done to move in that direction?
I think it's a cultural shift away from thinking, hey, you have to, setting out the career progression, you have to hit these wickets in order to advance. Um, you still, I mean, as an organization, you want guys to hit certain wickets, but you need to have lateral moves for guys so that they can go, okay, if you've been running hard for the last 6 or 7 years and you need a break, and maybe you don't even think you need a break, maybe you need to be told you need a break, you're going to shift laterally for, 2 years, and basically go into a training environment, go into some sort of an environment where you're home, if not every night, most nights, and then jump back into that pipeline, so to speak, of now you're back on the track without having any negative effects on your career. And that's something that a lot of guys, or at least what I saw, that wasn't really there. Or at least, maybe it was there, and I just, I did look at it negatively. If guys went and did training gigs, I did, and that some parts of me, I look back on that now and I'm like, well, maybe that would have actually been a good thing to do at a certain point.
So when you're training now, because like looking at your schedule, I wrote down just for a couple months. I mean, you have lots of classes. Now you seem to spread them out. You'll do 2 months and take a month off and train for another 2 months with, 3 or 4 days a month. How do you do that with family now? Do they come along with you? How does that work out?
So the biggest thing that I have, that I've been learning over the last year and a half now is just to say no. Because it went from, when I first retired and started doing this business, it was just, man, if someone wanted to do a training event someplace, like, I was, trying to get after it. And then honestly, like at first it wasn't that much, it takes a while to kind of get the name out there and get your own business established. But now we're at the point where I've turned over a dozen things down already this year, just like good things that I would have liked to have done. And I don't have the bandwidth to do it. And I just look at it and I go, okay, well, like this is the dollar amount that I would gain from it, but I don't need that. But you know what? My kids they're growing up really fast. Like they need me around. And so as much as I would, maybe I would even like to go do this because they seem like good guys, or, in some cases I know the guys and they are good guys and I'd love to go train them. I have to look at it and go, well, I'm going to disappoint someone. I'd rather disappoint, a buddy that wants some firearms training than my children. And that, and when you put it like that, you're like, well, of course, but sometimes you have to have that talk with yourself and say, hey, well, these are the options. Like I can disappoint someone that, will be able to find other training. It's not like they're going to die if they don't train with me. Or,
you're going to feel really bad if they do, but
I would feel really bad. So I either disappoint that guy or I disappoint my children. And then also, like, we're talking about duty. Well, where does my primary duty, where does my primary allegiance lie? Is it with guys that I'm training, or does it lie with my family? I mean, and there is some both of both of that. Cause Absolutely. I mean, I've got really, really good friends. I mean, half the places I go and train now, buddies pick me up at the airport and I stay at their house. I mean, I'm like, a lot of these guys have become really good friends to me. So there is some allegiance there. But also, like, I mean, all those guys, if you sat down and you explained to them, hey man, like I need to spend more time with my kids right now. Also I have a pregnant wife and, like all those things. That's, I think when you sit down and you think about it in those terms, I think it's easier to do that. And I have now with my oldest boy, I've started bringing him on some of the trips now. He actually just got to go with me to the Modern Warrior Conference, which was awesome. We opened it up to some of the guys who have boys that are our kids' age. So that was a really cool dynamic of, having him and a couple other boys around his age there, just getting reps in, hanging out with men. Good. I would have loved to do that stuff when I was a kid.
Well, do they look at you as a rock star now? Your kids? Because I know my kids look at my podcast as I'm an idiot. So they're like, yeah, it's awesome. Great. I'll tell everybody, and I get it.
I mean, ultimately I'm dad, I mean, there's no, it doesn't matter, doesn't matter what, how amazing or unamazing you are. Like, to your kids, your dad. You know,
Well, now here's the thing. If people don't know this, you have 6 kids.
6 and another one on the way.
Okay. That's mind-boggling to me, first off, because I have 3 daughters, and I don't know how you do. That's like doubled up. Like, they've got you guys pinned down for sure. They outnumber you.
It actually gets easier with number 4. It gets easier, and then 5 way easier. 6.
Okay, all right. So you're gonna have to explain this, because seriously, I have 3, and at no point did I go, "Oh, with 3, yeah, it's pretty easy." Yeah, it's a lot easier than having none or one.
Yeah, so we were blessed. Our first was a girl, and so she does actually help. She cooks. She helps take care of her brothers, and then, you know, I jokingly say that it gets easier, but to some extent, I mean, the kids play with each other. You know, they're best friends and worst enemies, either simultaneously or, you know, every couple minutes. You know, but they, you know, for the most part, they're great friends, and they're constantly running around in the woods and just doing things that little kids are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I have 3 daughters, so I have no just I know that I did something in the past that I'm paying for right now, because 2 of them are teenagers. One is getting to that age, and I'm telling you, it's a lot. So when you say you have 6, I guess the point of that is, when you say they play together, because of course that happens, and they're out in the woods, you seem to me to have a very, as busy as your life is, a very simple life. You teach a very simple life to your kids, to your family, to the people that are around you that you train. They're out in the woods playing. Is that a fair assessment of your life?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have a TV. I mean, we do watch, you know, especially Star Wars type shows. Kids love any of the Star Wars stuff.
Okay.
So we do watch some stuff on, you know, on a computer. But no, we don't have TV. There's no video games. My kids aren't even allowed to be at other kids' houses if they're playing video. If there's any video game going on, they have to leave.
Okay.
Which has been great. Yeah, they run around. My boys, my oldest 2 are riding dirt bikes now, so that's been awesome to watch. I've pushed some dirt around with a tractor to make a couple jumps for them, and you know, they like doing that. They like, I mean, we've got a little farm, so shoot, right now we've probably got 40 some sheep and a bunch of goats, and you know, a ridiculous amount of chickens right now. And so, you know, there's chores. They probably have, you know, hour or so of chores in the morning, and then, you know, shorter amount of chores in the evening. So there's a lot going on. And then we're homeschooling too. So they're doing school every day. You know, they're doing school today. So yeah, it's a pretty, you know, we encourage just, you know, more simple life, and, you know, running around. It's hard to keep shoes on those boys. You know, and they all run around quite a bit, and they can start fires and shoot BB guns, and, you know, kind of stuff that I think boys should do growing up. And then my daughter's riding. She has a horse now and spends a lot of time just training that horse, doing the, I forget, there's a fancy term for it, but basically lunging the horse, you know, so training it, going in circles, and then, you know,
okay.
riding and jumping the horse, and just kind of like, that's been such a great confidence thing for her, going, you know, from being scared of this thing to, like, you know, enforcing her will on this, you know, beast that is way bigger and stronger than her.
So you have 1 girl, all boys, and then another one on the way, which congratulations on that one.
Thank you.
Do we know what the one on the way is yet?
A girl.
Okay. So you kind of bookended it.
Yes.
So I am glad that I had all girls. I've always said that. I'm very glad that I had all girls. I think it's taught me different stuff in life than I would have known. I think sometimes it teaches you how to maybe treat people in a different way, because there's sensibilities that you have to kind of look out for. It's different friends. I've never had boys, but I would imagine that if boys come over, you can be a little more direct and things like that. You have to learn how to be with a girl. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yes and no. I guess there's not that many girls that come over to our
Okay.
house, so it's more, it's honestly much more boys coming over. And yeah, I am very direct with the boys, but honestly, I'm pretty direct with any of my daughter's friends as well, as far as, hey, you guys, like, you can't do this, or
Oh,
tell,
absolutely.
telling other people what to do has never been hard for me. So
My wife tells me that too. So,
but it's not, I thought everyone was like that, and that's not the case. Some people, it's really hard for to go and, like, other people's kids. If I look at it as, if your kids are hanging out at my house, I'm
they're
going to treat
going to
them like
do
my
what you
kids.
say.
I'm like, go help pick this up with my boys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So.
not the world today. And that is, it's funny that you say that, because I feel the same way. Like, if you want to come over and you want to be part of this family, then you need to, follow the same rules, follow the same guidelines, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think a lot of people, and that's when I ask you a simple life, I don't think a lot of people look at it that way in life anymore. I feel like we've become a very entitled world, and I worry about that for my children and for generations past them. Um, I try to instill hard work, dedication. You have to, if you want something, you have to earn it. It's not just given to you. But I feel like a lot of the world today is entitlement, and I worry about the future. And I know you have to worry about it too, especially with everything that you've done. Um, how do you take that approach? Because I know your kids see other kids, and they have to think that a little bit, right? Have you ever heard them say, like, well, they get to do this or they get to do this? Have they ever said that to you?
I mean, yeah, they've said that about some kids, but honestly, I mean, we just, where we live, it's very much, almost all of our friends are on some sort of, acreage, little homestead type thing.
Right.
Almost everyone we know homeschools. Our community is really tight. So, uh, there's not as much, yeah, some kids are still allowed to play video games, even in our community. But, I mean, uh, there's not a whole lot of that. I mean, I just go back to, well, hey, this is, you get to ride dirt bikes every day, and, have a motocross track in your backyard, and shoot guns, and, we get to do cool stuff. You ride snowmobiles in the wintertime and ski, and, like, do all this awesome stuff. And it's more awesome than what most people get to do. However, with that comes, you have to do more work than most kids have to do, because we can't take care of the farm by ourselves. Like, our kids are an integral part of taking care of the animals, and, not the animals are making us any money. It ends up being a lifestyle thing, but it's a cool lifestyle, to be able to go, yeah, we eat meat from our own farm quite a bit. We do, pigs every year. We do a run or two of meat birds every year. We put a lot of lamb in the freezer now every year. So it's, with a lot of privilege comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of hard work.
Yeah. I definitely think that. I think that a lot of the world has gotten away from that, though, and I worry about it. If we could, can we go back to your military career a little bit? I want to talk about something that you stated about the Middle East, because I want to ask you about some stuff that's going on. You stated that we can't kill our way out of there in another interview that you did.
Yeah.
You believe,
I mean, we could.
Absolutely. That's what I was just about to say.
Like, we could. It's so, first off, I don't think this would be the right thing to do, but I mean, we could just decide to nuke every major city over there and sink every ship and shoot down every airplane. Like, we could do that.
Kinetically, we could.
We could kinetically impose our will like that. That would not be the morally right thing to do. Like, I don't advocate for that plan. But we could. I guess what I mean is within the limitations that we have, within the worldview, kind of within the state that the United States is in right now, we do not have the will to do that, or even to do anything close to that in order to win.
The reason I ask that is because we're hearing now that we're going to pull all troops out of Afghanistan, that we're going to pretty much leave a vacuum over there. And I've asked a couple of guests this before. I want to know your thoughts because you've spent time over there. Good idea, bad idea. And the reason I ask you that is because the way you said that it wouldn't be the moral thing to do. We could do it kinetically, but just leaving and creating, like I said, a vacuum, I think creates way more problems in the end.
Well, so the United States military is great at killing people, breaking and destroying things. We are not great at doing nation building, all that kind of stuff. When you look at when the war in Afghanistan first started, it was a massive deal. The first, I think Johnny Spann was one of the first guys that got killed. And then, Roberts Ridge, a couple of our guys got killed up there, Battle of Takagar. Like that was a huge deal. Everyone was talking about it. And then you fast forward to like 09-ish, and multiple dudes were dying every single day. And like, people were like, oh, we're still fighting in Afghanistan. People had totally forgotten about it. And so in large part, I do think that, we should leave a small, United States presence there, mostly just to, kind of have finger on the pulse and be ready to reinvade when the time comes. But I think if we just installed someone that was that we had an understanding with, hey, keep the hardcore Islamists at bay. As long as you do that, we're going to support you. As soon as you stop doing that, we're going to reinvade and do what the American military does well, like go in and crush everyone. I mean, with a couple ODA teams at the beginning of the war, a couple ODA teams and a bunch of B-52s and, F-18s, like crushed the whole country.
Well, I think you were saying that an ODA team would show up and tanks and battalions would just turn and
they'd run away,
turn tail and run away.
Yeah. There's stories of the guys riding up on, over ridge lines on horseback, and like everyone's, thousands of people are fleeing before them,
Right.
So it's like, let's do what we do well. And that's just, adopt a policy that is, if you harbor these people that want to destroy us, we're going to come in and crush you. And then when we're done crushing you, we're not going to rebuild your country. We're going to take a guy and, we can have election, whatever you want to call it. We're going to take someone that's friendly to our cause, that has enough support to, not get overthrown the next day, put him in charge, give him some, low level of funding and support, and then move on to the next thing. I mean, that would have been so much cheaper in blood and treasure over the years if you just said, okay, how much money did we spend in Afghanistan, for the first year of the war, versus when they start figuring out that they can, blow us up, that IEDs are the preferred, method of fighting,
the cheapest way to fight.
How many $1 billion worth of, MRAPs and all this stuff to counter just ancient technology. Why not just, no, we just reinvade, to take the Israeli approach of just, have an understanding that we're not going to change these people. They hate us, period. Like we can't make them love us. It's not going to happen. So stop trying and just accept the fact that maybe every 10 or 15 years, you got to cut the grass. And then what does grass do? It grows back.
Yeah.
And then we cut the grass again. And we don't stop trying to turn this into Germany or Japan post World War II. Like that's not going to happen in these places unless not, Eric Prince floated some, I think, really fascinating ideas of, create a viceroy position that's like a 10 or 20 year position. And because that's another huge problem that we have over there was the constant turnover. I mean, you get a general in charge for the first 2 or 3 months. He doesn't want to change anything because he's getting his feet on the ground. Then he wants to change a bunch of things because now he thinks he's the smartest guy alive. And then, and then he, makes a few mistakes, changes one or two things. And then, now he's only got 3 more months to go before his tour is over. Like, I don't want to screw anything up. And so nothing gets done and there's zero consistency. So if you did, take that viceroy position, I think that would be a better chance of long-term success if we did want to do that, which I would be against, staying and, and occupying the country for a long period of time.
I just would like to point out, since you're a Star Wars fan, that the viceroy position did not work out well for a lot of different things.
It did not.
It did not. Trade federations, all that kind of stuff did not. Now we're nerding out a little bit, so we probably lost some people. But I'm just saying the viceroy position maybe didn't work that well.
The British East India Company worked for a while, though. And they had, similar type models where they had a little bit more consistency in their dealings with local people.
So I want to talk about when you left the service, and I want to talk about why, and then I want to wrap it back into religion again, because I had some thoughts that came to my mind when I heard you talk about it. Why'd you leave?
When I remember when I first got to SEAL Team 3, and I remember looking at guys that were 18-year guys at the time.
I'm glad you were talking about this.
They had never done anything for real. And I was terrified that would be me. Because at the time, there were some guys that had done some stuff. There's a couple guys that had, blown up Noriega's yacht, your combat swimmer op. There was some guys, that went on Pattaya Airfield. There's a couple other little things that had happened, some stuff in Somalia. But by and large, there had been no real war since Vietnam. And so the guys that were 18-year guys when I was a new guy had been trained by Vietnam guys. But they'd never done anything. And so initially I just thought, man, if I get one real mission, like, I'll be happy. And then how quickly things change. I mean, I remember at one point fast forward to 2003, sitting in a hangar in Baghdad going, man, like, this war is getting so lame. Like, it's been 4 hours and we haven't done anything, because it was, we were doing a lot of work, so things change. There was a couple, I mean, like, we'd kind of seen serious, things go really good for us in the war, and then things go really negative for us in the war. When Obama became president, one of the things I thought was pretty demoralizing was we stopped going after Islamic extremists, and they changed it to VEOs, violent extremist organizations. That was very demoralizing to me, because if we can't even name who we're fighting, how on earth are we going to win? How are we going to make a comprehensive U.S. foreign policy if we won't even name the fact that we're fighting Muslims? That's that's a huge problem. I mean, during the Cold War, we said, hey, we're fighting communists. The communists state that they want world domination. They think communism is going to win, so we're going to make a policy to beat that. And then we have Obama saying that ISIS is un-Islamic. ISIS is extremely Islamic. The ISIS and Al-Qaeda are the ones that are actually doing what the Quran tells them to do. The other ones, the ones that we would say are quote unquote the good ones, or the moderate Muslims, they are not actually following what their book tells them to do. And really, I mean, it's good for us that most of them don't actually follow it. They're more just what I would consider cultural Muslims than hardcore committed Muslims. So anyway, so that was discouraging to me. And then just kind of looking at it and seeing, we're not gonna, with the direction it's going, like, we're not going to kill our way to victory here. Also, and I got to do a lot of cool stuff, like, and I'd been doing it for a while, and then I was married and wanted to be around more. And I felt like, hey, that is where I want to pour my time and energy into my wife and into my children and into my local community. And um, I think there's more return on investment, that to use uh, the real estate term, what is, when you look at a piece of property, like what is this property's highest and best use? That is something that I try and do, self analytically from time to time. Like, am I I've got what, 35, 40 years left, right? In that 35, 40 years, am I, am I being used to my highest and best purpose? And ultimately for me, what determines that is am I giving God glory? Because that's why I was created. I mean, that's why all of us were created, was for his glory. And so if that's why we were created, then how do we do that? Well, by loving God and by loving other people. Part of loving other people is loving your wife, loving your children, and raising them to know and love Jesus. And then being involved in the community, trying to I have a phenomenal platform where I get to present the gospel to a bunch of local boys and train jujitsu with them, and shoot with them, and go in the mountains with them and just do cool stuff. And it's like, I just look at that as so much more impactful than doing another deployment and smacking targets. That was cool at the time, but every once in a while I still miss it a little bit. But for the most part, I'm like, what I am doing now, I think is more important.
So here's my question. I started thinking about that. I watched you talk about that in an interview, and it really started me thinking. With as important as religion is to you, and with the way you speak about what the Quran teaches, what Islam teaches, what the majority of Muslims, was it different for you? Did it have a different meaning? Did the battles, did the war that we've been fighting for 20 years, does it mean something different to you than the average person?
I think in some ways, yes. I mean, there is, I mean, and in part just because I did really educate myself on, what does our enemy actually believe? So I think, a lot of people, I think we're fine with, VEOs, Islamic extremists, violent extremist organizations. What's the difference? They're still, bad guys. I still get to hit a target. That was not the case for me. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely very, very, very vested in, definitely true believer in the cause.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when I heard you talk about it was, and maybe this is a crazy thing, but the first thing that came to mind was the Crusades. And right then I started thinking like this meant something different to him. And I think it goes all the way back to you saying that's what God created you for, was for his glory. But you said that that's what you were made to do, was to be a soldier. And I feel like it has to mean, I don't know if I want to use the word more to you, but it definitely, I think, means something different to you, this entire thing. Whether it's in the future that we're talking about, in the past that we're talking about, this has been raging for generations after generation. I think it means something different to you, but I want your opinion on what you think the difference is that we make, because a lot of people will say we're stopping them from coming over here, but I think it's something different to you.
Well, I first off, just to touch on the Crusades piece, I mean, that was something that I looked at because I had always been heard that the Crusades were this battle of, convert to Christianity or die, which is very much, that's not what Christianity teaches. It's not convert or die. That's never been, that is not how the gospel spread in the early church. And really there's not a whole lot of examples of that's, that's not how the gospel spreads. Love God, love your neighbor. That, nowhere in there is convert or die. So if you actually read, I believe it was Pope Urban II that wrote the I guess, declaration or the call for the First Crusade in 11 something, that was in response to 400 years of Islamic aggression. And Islamic, and Christian defeats across the known world. I mean, because Islam, when it spread, it was conquering, early on pagan territories, within Arabia, and then very quickly moving into predominantly Christian territory. And, so all North Africa, predominantly Christian. Palestine was predominantly Christian at the time, up into parts of France, Spain, France, like all those areas, that was all. And so it was after 400 years of that the Pope called for the First Crusade in order to, liberate the Holy Land and protect, protect pilgrims trying to make the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Now, in practice, the way warfare was fought back then was significantly different. I mean, raising, they would, if and both sides did this, if you laid siege to a city and they didn't surrender, like when the city fell, they let the soldiers go crazy, for a period of days, because, it was just, that was accepted practice. So I'm not defending, all of the things that were done, because obviously there was
I'll put a disclaimer in for disclaimer right here.
Yeah, there was atrocities committed, on both sides. But I think that things that, the West is just constantly apologizing for it, instead of going, well, why did the Crusades happen? And it's, well, because Islam did spread by the sword. Islam was absolutely convert, die, or pay the demi tax, which after a generation or two, people that aren't serious about their faith, they get tired of paying extra high tax and not being able to carry weapons. And any Muslim can come to your house and you have to put them up for like 3 or 7 days, something like that. Like all these things, you're a second class citizen. So if you're not serious about your faith and you want to advance in that society, ultimately, a lot of people converted because of that, because of, economic incentives. So yeah, I think it's just, you have to put the whole Crusades part of it in context right there. Was it that to me initially? No, it was, I mean, I remember sitting on the quarterdeck at the command when, the first plane hit, and then went up to the team room shortly after that, saw the second plane hit, and, right away it was like, hey, we're going to war. Like this is, it's on. And, these people attacked us. They'd been attacking us in for years previously, and we just had never, that was the wake up call that, hey, these guys are actually serious. And, so that's definitely what it was about. And initially for me, like, Afghanistan, I think was absolutely the right move. Iraq, I think in retrospect, man, what a horrible, intel failure. I mean, we all just like, what a massive lack of understanding. Like Al Qaeda hated Saddam, and vice versa. So to, the fact that we got that so wrong, I mean, that was my understanding of why we're going in here, is because they're going to team up, and like Saddam's going to hook AQ up with bad stuff, and, they're going to hit us on the homeland again. And that was, I don't think that was the case at all. And in the Middle East, I think is much destabilized because of that. And then shoot, in the years following that, I mean, our foreign policy just seems wildly inconsistent. Instead of just going, hey, we should have a policy that if you are a more secular leader in an Islamic country, we should probably support them to some extent, recognizing that they're all massive human rights violators. They're all, I mean, every single one of them, even our allies over there are have things that we find incredibly distasteful. So it's, well, do we want to support a guy that's distasteful, but he keeps his stuff at home? Or do we want to support a guy that's distasteful, that's also turning a blind eye to guys training in his country that are going to perpetuate attacks on our homeland? And so I really think that that should be the litmus test for whether or not we support a, a Islamic country.
Does it ever end?
Cut the grass. I mean, no, not until Christ comes back. Like, I mean, it's just, human nature is sinful. Like, whether we're arguing about Islam or communism or whatever the next thing is, like, we're sinful people. We're going to be fighting. Like, there's not, we shouldn't expect for things to be uh, amazing here, right? I mean, times of peace are few and far between.
I don't think the average person thinks that, though. I think the average person, like with the changing of names and giving them a different title and stuff, I think that's what people are hoping for, is that things will just kind of go away. I think a lot of people stick their head in the sand and expect it just to go away. And I think that's part of the problem that gives us these foreign policies, is a lot of people that are making this think as long as we make these people happy or we do things to show that we're being progressive towards them, that they'll stop doing what they're doing.
Yeah, they look at that as weakness. That's just,
absolutely.
they laugh at us behind closed doors. They laugh at us and they're like, the pathetic, weak Americans, we're tricking them again. We're making them give us more money that we're going to use against them. I mean, that's overwhelmingly what they're doing.
So the final thing I want to kind of talk about in this is there was a news article, a TV show that talked about the state of Navy SEALs and Special Forces people that were maybe using their popularity to gain something. I want to get your thoughts on it, because I've asked a couple of guys that have come on the show, what are your thoughts on people kind of cashing in on being a SEAL or having taken part in special operations? And what I mean by special operations, of course, is Bin Laden and different things like that. What are your thoughts on
that? We have a term for that. It's called pimping the trident.
Okay.
And guys look down on that. I mean, for sure. I mean, if you look on my website, like, I will say that I was at SEAL Team 3 and I was at Dev Group. Yeah. You won't see any tridents on there. You won't see much else about that, because honestly, the way I look at it is, I worked hard. That was, that is part of who I am. If you sign up for training with me because that is my background, great. But I don't want you to come back because of something that I did 10 or 15 years ago. Like, I want you to come back because it was the best training you've gotten. And so, yeah, I really have a lot less patience for guys that just want to talk about, what they did in the teams versus, hey, what are you doing now? Because it's, we're constantly moving forward. What are you doing now?
Well, I think my question to that is kind of the follow up to it is that you have a few that have really really kind of gone above and beyond that, of pimping that trident out. There's been a few, and some names come to mind, and I wonder, how does the community, how does that person keep coming around? Because they're gonna keep coming around because they need that identity, but I have a feeling they're not really accepted back into that community.
No, I mean, you get PNG'd when that happens, persona non grata. And, I don't care how much money you're making for a speaking engagement, to not have the respect of your brothers, not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I've heard that a lot of them just want people to kind of go away because it's almost started shedding a bad light. Not almost, but it has started shedding a bad light where you're constantly under the microscope now. And
they're they're hurting the teams by doing that, because now the decision makers have to go, okay, well, we've got an organization, we know they'll get the job done, but they'll probably all talk about it and write books afterwards. And Therefore, maybe we should use a different organization that's maybe gonna, keep their act together a little bit better, be a little bit more professional in their post mission handling. So yeah, it hurts the organization ultimately.
Let's talk about what you're doing now. Let's talk about Amtac blades first.
Sure.
Came up with the idea. It started with a conversation with your friend. You wanted a fixed blade instead of it's a fixed blade where your folding knife goes kind of deep in your pocket, sheath, all that kind of stuff. Why did you come up with the idea? We know where it came from, but why did you come up with that idea?
I've been blessed to be able to train with Sac Collie and with Etienne Collie for many years now. 05, 06 ish, something like that was when we started working with those guys. And so one of the things we would always joke about is that a folder is already a halfway broken knife. And so initially it was just, hey, I'd like a tool. I would like a better tool. I live on a farm. I'd like a better tool that just fits in my pocket, and it's faster to deploy. And so really it just started as that, is like, yeah, you could also use it as a weapon. But generally, like we keep our weapons blade on our other strong side, opposite our pistols. So originally it was just as the tool. And then, early on during the development of it, we started making some blue ones to just to have in your pocket for training, and just found that there's a lot of times where that ended up being a little bit faster, especially if you have, talking concealed carry stuff, you have maybe a couple more layers on, maybe a tighter jacket, and it takes you longer to clear. That the what we call the puño, the back end of the of that little fixed blade knife, the Northman is sticking out of your pocket, so it's actually quasi exposed. Most guys look at it and just see, they see a clip and they think it must be a folder, but it's really, really fast into hand. So the more I started teaching, the more I just naturally found that there was a lot of times where you would end up with that in your hand. Now I would say I think it's probably a 20 to 30% improvement in capability. For one, it's another spot that you have a weapon. So if kind of the basic integrated combative system, you have your pistol on one side, you have your blade on your other strong side. So you can deploy a lethal tool with either hand. A guy that can deploy a lethal tool with either hand is an order of magnitude more dangerous than the guy that can only produce a tool with one hand. I mean, if you think about if you grapple at all, like it's easy to control one arm, 2-on-1. But if I'm going 2-on-1 on your gun side and you pull a blade out with your other hand, it causes a lot of problems for me. I have to approach everything completely different if I'm trying to control both hands at the same time. Very challenging to do. So it just kind of really grew from there. As start off as this tool that more farm use, and then as it grew, and then also kind of grew into, well, I do a lot of backcountry stuff. I go out hiking and rucking and skiing and snowmobiling and all that stuff a lot. And so we built in a ferro rod into the pocket sheath, because that's another thing that I think as a man you should always be able to build a fire. Your family, your life, your family's life might depend on that someday. So having a ferro rod is a very useful thing. We put a really thin layer of hook pile tape on the back so that you could have some guys will put $100 bill or lockpick set, or I normally put a little bit of take like a little micro Ziploc bag and put a single Vaseline soaked cotton ball. Right, I know with that I can start a fire in the wintertime in our country, because that will very readily take a spark that I can throw very confidently, off of the the fire sheath that comes with the Northman. So it's kind of this dual purpose tool. And then the more we started training with it, the more we found that, man, like, think of the times when, someone's going to suplex you from behind, right? And they have their arms around your waistline. You have to be able to do grappling moves, i.e. drop your base, create space, hip forward, in order to produce a tool that is on your waistline. Or you can just reach into your pocket and stab the guy. Same thing, someone has mount on you, right? In order to, if someone has mount, in order for me to draw from my waistline, either blade or gun, I have to shrimp and do some stuff that, shrimp or bump. I have to do some grappling moves, which take skill and strength in order to do. Or I can just reach into my pocket and, plunge the blade into the guy's kidney. We call that fatal embrace, bring him down to your side and then right into the, carotids or subclavians from there. I mean, it opens up a lot more options. Plus just normal hanging out. As soon as you think that there's potentially problems, I hang out with my hand on my blade a lot, and it just looks like my thumbs are hooked in my pockets. Very, very natural hangout position, but also a very capable one. So that's kind of that's where the Northman was the first blade that we did. I mean, it's been awesome to watch just the growth. The first, thought we were really rolling the dice, going in with 100 of them at first. And
did you sell out in like 3 hours?
I think about 5 hours. Yeah. And it was awesome. It was all students, all guys that, I mean, every email that came in, I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is one of my buddies. This is one of my buddies. And then, the next 100 probably took 6 or 9 months to sell. And then it's just, the circle keeps growing to where now the majority of the guys that are ordering, I don't know who they are. Still like we're trying to pull guys in onto the training side of things. But we've had some great exposure with, magazine articles and Jack Carr's been awesome. We're actually, there's Northman usage in the fourth book, The Devil's Hand.
I interviewed him about a month ago.
Pretty awesome. Yeah. He's a good dude. So yeah, it's been a cool thing, and we're 3 models into it now. So our next model was we called it the Magnus, 5-inch blade, a little bit bigger handle, specifically designed for other strong side carry. Went with a 5-inch blade first because that's what I like. Fully recognizing that most people in civilian life think that a 5-inch blade for everyday carry is slightly excessive, but I'm like, my company, this is what we're going to do. And then, I'm like, this is right. And then
if James Reese carries one, they're fine.
Yeah. The following year, we came out with the Minuteman, and that's the same size handle as a Magnus, but a 4-inch blade. I think more guys will find that about right. And for anyone that has one on order, they're shipping out tomorrow. So
I got buddies at work that go bananas over these. When I told them I was interviewing you, they were like, those are the baddest knives on the planet.
Well, we definitely, we try to make them with, the end user in mind. We train with these things all the time. It's cool now to see more than 50% of the guys in classes will be rolling Amtac blades when we're doing combatives training. So like they're getting a lot of rep. Great.
That's got to, awesome. I mean, you've got to feel like, you've gone from a world where you excelled very much so into another world where you've excelled very much into. That's got to be, and I've never heard anything in your transition, in your story, anything I've ever read where you kind of slowed down. Guys will get out, and whether that be law enforcement, first responder, military, and they just kind of lose purpose in life. They don't know really where they're going to go. And I think that once again falls back to your religion. But it doesn't seem like you've ever really lost purpose. You've excelled in one, gone right into another, and excelled because you've always had kind of an end point in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Faith at the foremost has been, huge. And then also just great friends and mentors. I mean, the guys, within SIOC, my old teammates, one of my local buddies, Jay Koback, I've just had a lot of good advice. Northman Actual over in Maine, lots of good friends that have helped encourage and just help out with, whether it's on the business side or the design side or just like the round table side of things, the talks. Hey man, like you're screwing up in this area. You should do this.
Right.
Todd McMullen. He'll appreciate that. It's just, these you can't do this stuff by yourself. It's you have to have that, that tribe of guys around you that encourage you and will call you out sometimes as well.
Let's talk about Amtac Shooting, American Tactical Shooting Instruction. The motto is train hard, know your tools, and win. Like I said, you teach pistol, vehicle combatives, rifle, medical. You run the whole. You run the whole kind of gambit of it, of everything. And I've even seen where you incorporate rolling into knife manipulation, weapon manipulation. It is a complete course that a lot of people don't give anymore. You'll go to a shooting course and it'll just be shooting, but you kind of incorporate everything into yours.
For sure. The combative side of things has always been something that I, have been very passionate about. So the way I approach everything is, if there's two ways of doing things and one way is combative and the other way is not combative, and they both accomplish the same mission. Let's say, take for instance, loading our firearm. So I can load here, I can frame the weapon in my workspace in front of me, or I can look down and have it by my belt line. Both of those accomplish the same thing. You load your firearm both ways. But if we said, well, that particular thing has two negatives. If you're loading your firearm by your belt buckle, number one, where's your situational awareness going? Which that is actually the most important thing when we talk combatives is what's your awareness level. So where's your awareness go? It goes to the ground right in front, right at your feet. Whereas if I'm framing the weapon in between myself and my potential threat, now my awareness goes towards where my potential threat is. So I could look at my firearm if I needed to on a combat reload or on some sort of malfunction clear. I could look at my firearm and still track on my potential threat through my periphery. So there's that. But then the next piece is, I always ask guys this: if me and you are getting ready to get into the fight of our lives, how do you want me to start? Do you want me to start up here, with a weapon in between us and me looking at you, or do you want me to start, with the weapon down by my belt buckle and my head looking down? Right. And the obvious answer is, if I'm fighting you, I want you to look down, right? Don't look at me. Right. So, I do that to other people. We call it the don't look at me, don't look at me policy, to manipulate people's heads. Don't look at me concept. Anytime in stand-up grappling or any kind of manipulations, if you can turn someone's head offline, you make them weaker. And then also they bring their hands up to their face generally to try and peel that off. And if your hands are up here by your face, they're not at your waistline where most people keep tools. So I'll introduce that concept of there's two ways of doing things. They both accomplish the same thing. But one, if we say go right now and it's the fight of your life, you're in a good position, and the other, you're not in a good position for a fight, well, then let's always pick the more combative way of doing things. So that would be one of the big overarching principles that we try and convey. And then the other one is, if all I teach you is how to do this, right? For anyone that's just going to be listening, I'm working my trigger finger, right? If that's
be a
the
video
only
version too. So.
Okay. If that's all I'm doing is teaching guys how to manipulate their trigger fast, then you end up creating carpenters that only have hammers. And if you're a carpenter that only has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I would much rather have guys that can smash people, that can throw some elbows, some headbutts, that can do some stand-up grappling, stay on their feet. Because if you can do that, a lot of times you can win with a significantly lower level of violence. And it's always a higher level win to win with a lower level of violence, right? If I can win by just elbowing the guy in the face and walking away, if that was one option, the other option was me shooting him 5 times, right? Option A is better for me. It's better for him. It's better for my family. It's better for that guy's family. It's better across the board. So you have to give guys options on, different things that they can do in order to, to win in a violent confrontation, not necessarily always going to gun or going to blade or something else that is end up going to be lethal.
Well, I watched your episode of 100 Deadly Skills with Clint Emerson, and you were definitely getting at it. There was some crazy stuff I saw you do, and very quickly. Uh, I think you cut a guy's bowels out, meat hooked him in the back of the neck, and shot him all in like 14 seconds. It was amazing to watch, and I know that takes years. But let's talk about the person that maybe hasn't trained for years, or is just getting into it because they're realizing that society is changing, that they need to protect that family, need to protect themselves. They look at something like that and go, there's no way I can do that. So how do we get those people into the fold?
Come train with me, or with guys that are in the system. I mean, ultimately, like, I mean, I've got a lot of guys that thought that was a really hard thing to do. I mean, I remember having a guy in a class. It was a force on force class. This guy had done multiple classes before, not with me, but with other guys in industry. And the first go, there was a guy with a training machete that was charging him, and of course he gets crushed by this dude. And then I debrief him. I'm like, hey, this is what I want you to do. When if a dude is charging you, I want you to sprint offline, draw your pistol, and shoot him in the face. We're using airsoft guns. And he looks at me like I'm crazy. Like, you want me to move and do a headshot one-handed all at the same time? And I'm like, it's not hard, dude. Like 2 runs later, he's doing it. He's just, no one's ever told him that, hey, this is not a hard thing to do. It's not something that generally people train to do, but it's really not hard once if you have the formula for it and you teach it the right way. It's not a hard thing to do.
But I don't think a lot of people teach the right way. I think that a lot of people go into these classes and you get these instructors that believe that you should know everything. Well, why take the class if you're supposed to know everything anyway? And I think that frustrates or maybe puts people off from taking these classes. I know you've seen it in the military, because I've seen it in law enforcement and in the military, where you get these guys that, well, you don't know how to do that. Well, you're a lost cause. They're a lost cause until you give them the cause.
Why would you come to a class if you knew how to do everything? I mean,
I agree.
I tell that to guys all the time when they're like, oh, sorry, man. I'm like, why are you sorry? Like, if you knew how to do all this stuff, I'd be out of a job. Right. I mean, like, my job is to make you a more capable individual, regardless of what level you're at. The things that I try and focus on with guys, just to lay a couple of the top ones out. Number 1, increase situational awareness. Number 2, 100% safety with your pistol. Right. If you decide you're going to carry a gun at all times, you are at least manipulating your firearm twice a day, when you get up in the morning and when you go to bed at nighttime. If every time you manipulate your pistol, you point that thing at the wall in front of you, because we all know walls are always safe, right? And your kid's head's on the other side of that wall, and you load pointing at that wall every time, you're actually putting your family's life in danger every time you load and unload your firearm in order to, quote unquote, protect them. So number 1, we have to be 100% safe with our tools, right? We have to be very, I tell guys, hey man, your reputation's on the line every time you handle your firearms. Be deliberate about it. Be safe about it, right? So, because the odds of you actually using your firearm to protect yourself are very, very low. But if you're going to carry, that means you're committing to handling your firearm at least twice a day. So number 1, increase situational awareness. Number 2, 100% safety with firearms. Number 3, being sure that your gun's going to go bang when you want it to go bang, right? If you don't know how to ensure that you've gone through a proper loading procedure every single morning, again, huge problem. Next one would be clean draw stroke from concealment. If you can't, this is one of the things that gets me about kind of the modern state of training is everyone trains with outside the waistband holsters. No one carries outside the waistband holster. Or very few guys carry outside the waistband holsters, right? Everyone has something inside the waistband, right? Let's train with what we carry. Because, like, who cares how fast your draw stroke is from an outside the waistband holster? You're never going to wear that anyways. Like, let's work through how do we safely draw and reholster that concealed carry whatever concealed carry pistol you use in a concealed holster. The next would be, and I put the next two kind of on the same plane. Other strong hand only blade deployment and targeting. So being able to pull out a blade with your other strong hand and know where to put it and what to do post penetration. That and combative weapons retention shooting. Basically, being able to punch people or elbow people while you're pulling your pistol out. I put those next two, and really those items are, in my opinion, the most important when it comes to being able to protect yourself and your family. All the other stuff that how many guys put crazy amount of time and effort into combat reloads? You see it on IG all the time, the shot to shot. Like, who cares? Where is that? Yes, you need to be, you need to have you need to be proficient at doing a combat reload, right? Or emergency reload. But how many guys' lives would have been saved if they had a 1 second faster combat reload versus how many guys' lives would have been saved if they had head on a swivel and saw this dude walking up, from 330 with a pipe in his hand, right? So, I mean, we have to, how many guys' lives would have been saved if they could have thrown a punch while pulling their pistol out at the same time? What does that punch do to the other guy's draw stroke or the other guy's use of his weapon? And if I can do that now while I'm while I'm producing tools, way better. So that's some of the stuff that I think is very valuable. I don't, I really don't look at any of the stuff that I teach as advanced. I think it's, being a good shooter, being good at combatives is simply being, having mastered the fundamentals and and whatever the aspect is, whether it's, being able to draw and shoot something or being able to draw and stab something or being able to throw a punch, being able to transition from punches to blade or from punches to gun. All those things, they're not hard. They just require reps.
In talking about all this, you also teach a group, from what I'm understanding, a group just in your community where it's fathers and sons, and you do life lessons, but you also, I thought it was interesting the timing where you do like 20 minutes of training, then you do devotional, and then you go back into training. Is there a reason why it's set up like that?
Yeah, so generally it's a little bit longer. Generally we'll do, as it was originally intended, we would start off with, 45 minutes to an hour of jiu-jitsu, and then we would do a 15 to 20-minute Bible lesson, and then we do another 45 minutes to an hour of some sort of a life skill, and everything from shooting to, building shelters, getting the boys out there, starting fires, dressing hogs, getting vehicles unstuck. Basically, if you made a list of what you should know as a man, it's probably on our list of things that our boys should do. We put the gospel in the middle because, the idea was make it cool enough so that guys will come for the other parts of it, and then we'll, quote unquote, suffer through the gospel. So they can't show up late or leave early and miss the gospel part of it. Since then we kind of, it's morphed several times. We were kind of going crazy with it, and it was, it's on a weeknight and we're out till 9 o'clock at night sometimes. And that was being a bit excessive. So we've kind of cut down a little bit. And now generally we'll either grapple. If we're rolling, we'll roll for like hour and 20 to hour and a half, and then do our Bible lesson at the end. But we don't have anyone leave. So we're ready to tackle if they do now.
So what's some of the things that you teach in that? And when you get to the gospel part, what are you teaching them? Because you're teaching them, like you said, life skills. Now you're teaching them a different set of life skills. So what are some of the, I don't want to call them sermons because I don't think they're sermons, but what are some of the passages that you're teaching and some of the stories that you're teaching?
So this year, the theme has been becoming a stronger Christ follower. And just kind of, last year's theme was, your identity in Christ, and kind of, and I think last week we talked on Job and just the suffering, was our second week in Job. And, look at so the first chapter in Job, Satan goes before the Lord and asks to basically, take away all of his wealth and most of his family. And God says, yeah, you can do that, but don't touch him. And then, Job does not lose his faith is kind of the short version. In Job chapter 2, devil goes back before the Lord and says, well, you didn't touch him. Like if, a man would sell everything to like stay healthy, basically. And so God says, do what you want, but don't kill him. And so then he has all these like horrible boils and like, lots of pain and like illness. And then he goes through this, like his wife says, curse God and die. His friends all show up and are like, you must have screwed up really bad for God to punish you like this. And the whole time is just Job, like it's not Job, cheerful. Like Job is lamenting the day he was born, like he is very sorrowful, but the whole time he's like, no, God, God gives and God takes away. Like, who am I to only like expect one? And so just talk. And then that led into the theme, suffering for Christ. I think we're in First Peter 5:12, somewhere in there. And it's talking about, why are you surprised when you would suffer for Christ? Like, Christ suffered. And as Christians, right, where that term comes from it was a derogatory term that they started giving to early Christ followers. Originally, it was just called the way. This guy's a follower of the way. And then they started calling them Christians because, this guy's a little Christ, right? It's a little Christ. And they thought it was a derogatory term. So if they hated Christ to the point where they crucified him, like, why do we think that they're not going to hate us? Because we're not, we're supposed to be in the world, but not of it. But, the things that the Bible preaches is contrary to what the world looks as wisdom, what the world looks at as right a lot of times. And so, we should expect persecution. We should expect things to go wrong. We should expect to have hardship. And that's honestly, it's been hugely comforting to me. Like it's been one of the things that's kind of been jumping out at me in the scriptures lately, as I've been reading it, is just this theme that, man, when we have good times, that's actually, kind of like war. It's, it's few and far between. Like the majority of the time, like probably expect for there to be battles and for there to be hardships and, disappointments and that's just the way it is, right? I mean, on this side of eternity, anyways. And that, and that's the great thing is our hope is in Christ, is that, one day he will make it all right.
Well, let's tell everyone where they can find you, because you've got of a lot of people that teach what you teach, you have the most interesting kind of background and things that you add into your training. So where can they find you to do this?
So amtacshooting.com is our training business. We have all of our courses posted on that. We should be posting for 22 here, at least the first half of 22 within the next month or two. amtacblades.com is our blade business. We are on Instagram and Facebook and Parlor now as well, with both Amtac Blades and Amtac Shooting. So yeah, either of those.
Can we get a price point on some of the blades for people?
$450 to $550.
Okay. All right, guys. I think that's going to be it for tonight. Bill, I want to thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to do this. I know you're a super busy man, and I appreciate everything that you've done for your community, for the country, just kind of bringing in a simpler kind of life and the core values of what we need. It's few and far between these days. So I want to thank you for all that you do in that. Guys, that's going to be it for the show tonight. You can go to Amtac Shooting, sign up for one of the classes, Amtac Blades, pick up a blade. If you want more of me, you can find me on Twitter at DoublespeakDJ. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast, and you can find me on YouTube at the DTD Podcast. You come here every week because the best stories are true. That's Bill. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.